Welcome to Alimentary, the podcast series where you will learn about your amazing body, how it works, and of course why food is so important. We have our store cupboard staples at the end of each episode. We'll also learn more about lifestyle tips and therapies to help you to influence your health in a positive way. In this episode, we are diving into a topic that many of us can relate to, how challenging it can be to make and sustain healthy lifestyle changes. Whether it's adjusting our eating habits, finding time to exercise, or managing stress, the journey towards better health is often filled with ups and downs. Now, there is no one-size-fits-all solution, and it's really important to remember that every step forward, no matter how small, is meaningful. So today we're joined by Elizabeth Dall, a food freedom expert and certified women's health and wellness coach who helps women to create sustainable, healthy habits that lead to body confidence and transformation. Over the years, she has helped thousands of women to achieve a healthy lifestyle and body change by focusing on mindset and habits. She's passionate about empowering women to take charge of their health in a way that's sustainable, realistic, and aligned with their own unique lifestyle. So together we'll explore the common obstacles people face, the emotional and practical hurdles involved, and how we can approach these changes with kindness and patience towards ourselves. This episode is a judgment-free space where we acknowledge that making healthy choices isn't always easy, but it's absolutely possible. So let's get started and learn more from our guest, Elizabeth Dall. So Elizabeth, it's so lovely to talk to you today. And I have obviously been checking out your website and everything. And I feel like we, think along the same lines about a lot of things. So I'm really, really interested to hear your perspective on things today. But I wonder, could we start maybe, would you mind sharing with our listeners a little bit about what actually made you interested in this line of work and in working in this field?
Yeah, that's a great question, actually. It started many years ago. I was a personal trainer. I knew I wanted to be in the health field in some way. And so I started in personal training and I started giving my clients these quote textbook perfect plans. I was like, okay, follow this, eat this way. And what would happen is they would only see me a couple days a week in the gym and I'd give them these plans and they'd come back and they weren't following them. And there was a disconnect for me. I'm like, well, here's the plan. You have it. You should be able to get results. And the reality is that life got in the way, right? They didn't know how to implement the plan. And so that's really what got me realizing that there's more to it than just following a perfect plan. I think if it was that easy, everyone would have health, right?
Exactly.
But there's more to it, and there's a lot of behavior behind it, and a lot of stories that we have, and a history, and all of that. And so that's really what led me to then, I enrolled in more education and focused more on the science as well as the psychology of behavior change, and how do we change behavior, and how do we identify those things that are holding us back? So that's really what got me started in this area of helping with healthy habits and sustainable habits and, having food freedom in your life.
It is so interesting. It's, the more you get into it, how the mind works is just amazing. And I suppose through your studies and then through your clinic or working with clients as well, are there any sort of common themes that keep recurring about what are the biggest challenges when it comes to making healthy lifestyle changes? I presume convenience is definitely probably up there.
Yeah. And I'm gonna go into the psychology. It's the all or nothing thinking.
Okay.
It's what we're taught is that we go all in, right? So we do all the right things, follow that exact plan, and that sets us up for failure 100% of the time. When we feel like there's this expectation of perfection, that's really what leads us into that cycle of starting over, right? That cycle of, I'm going to do this. I've got some motivation. Life gets in the way. I sabotage. And then eventually I start again when I get some either motivation to do something or disgust, right? I need to escape this body. I need to lose the weight, all those things. And we start that, what we call the diet cycle, over and over again. And it really comes down to that core of we're in this all or nothing thinking.
So that if they're not achieving 100% perfection, they get distracted. People get distracted. I mean, of course, I've been there myself as well, you know. So that we sort of feel that even if we achieve like 90%, that somehow it's not quite a success.
Yeah. And we kind of what happens is, I mean, many of us have probably done this where we tell ourselves we can't have this particular food because it's not on the
Mm.
plan or the diet. And we have one of them, and it spirals us to eating five instead of just one because of that approach that I need to be perfect and I can't have this in moderation. And it just keeps that spiral going.
I like to talk to people about the principles of building their plate, you know, the principles of how to eat. But sometimes people do need a plan to sort of give them a little bit of a kickstart. I think it probably varies from person to person, but you really have to teach people how to think about what they're putting into their shopping trolley and proportions and that kind of thing. Do you find that helpful?
Absolutely. What I
Yeah.
usually do with clients, and especially those that have maybe struggled in this diet cycle, like we've talked about, is we begin with mindful eating. We start to connect our bodies and our brains and say, okay, I'm identifying my body's hunger cues and those fullness cues. We're such chaotic eaters, you know, and if we've been in diet on and off diets, we also have in our mind, I shouldn't eat this or I have only this much. And so we have rules around them. So the first thing that we do is really say, okay, let's get in tune with your body and listen to those hunger and fullness cues. And then the second thing is bring in that nutrition strategy. It's a good thing to have a nutrition strategy because when you have the right nutrients, when you give your body the right nutrients, you can better rely on those hunger and fullness cues. If you have protein in your body, you can
Mm.
rely on some fullness cues. If you've just eaten a bagel, it's really hard
Yeah.
to rely on that because protein is a satisfactory macronutrient. It makes us feel satisfied and full. And so I like to kind of go that route where I mindful eating is a really good place to start connecting. And then yes, a nutrition strategy is really important to maintain.
Sometimes it is those changes that people can think are too simple. And is this really going to get results? And then it's lovely when, you know, they just make a couple of changes, whether it is slowing down, eating at the table, you know, chewing food, taking a few deep breaths before you eat, those kind of things, even just hydrating. And even with habit changes, you can start to see a result if you trust the process. When it comes to, I mean, you mentioned sort of chaotic eating. So obviously lifestyle and busy lifestyles plays a part, but I think social media can play a part as well. Um, and seeing, first of all, there's unrealistic, you know, ideals of what people think they should be attaining, you know, and then some of the advice, maybe little snippets of advice that aren't in the context of someone's own life or history or health, you know. How do you feel that it has a positive or a negative influence on people's health?
Yes, and I believe that people can curate what
Yeah,
influence it has on them. So
yeah.
the biggest struggle really is comparison. And I like to say there's two or three, I'm trying to remember, comparison situations. One, comparison with others, right? You see. Two, comparison with an ideal. So sometimes social media does show that ideal. And three, comparison with what you used to be or yourself, right? Sometimes we're like, I used to be this size or I used to be fit. And so social media definitely plays a role in the noise that we receive, right? What we receive. And then we have the opportunity to then curate that noise and say, well, what am I willing to engage in? What am I willing to see? There might be some things we can't avoid or we might just see. But for the most part, we can kind of curate that feed to help us feel positive. And I always tell people if it makes you feel less than in your body in any way, it's probably not a supportive account or anything, even if it's good intentions, right? But if
Mm.
you feel that way, it would be a good idea to kind of eliminate it from that noise.
Mm. When you open a social media account, just looking at the accounts that you've chosen and not necessarily like for you pages
Yeah.
that you look at, sort of what the accounts you've chosen to follow. I only actually noticed that on Instagram recently myself, that you can just actually see because I thought, oh, I'm not seeing any of my friends. It's giving me all of these things for, that the social media accounts think you want as a, woman of a certain age or whatever. So that's a really good point. I like that, curating what you see. That's a really really good word to do that. And then aside from social media, are there any other influences in our lives that affect our mindset around our attitude to healthy lifestyles?
Yeah. It would, it really begins with what we were taught when we were younger. So if you had a mom or an aunt or a grandma who was always dieting or clean your plate, or somebody, that was telling you that you needed to diet or you needed to change your body, it really stems from that. And
Mm.
most women will have some form of a story where, at some point they discovered that their body was different, right? This brings in the comparison, different than the ideal, different than hers, different than it used to be. And they connected that with the meaning that it was bad or wrong. And so that's really where a lot of these things stem from, is the stories and the beliefs that you have around where you're at compared to that ideal or compared to the other, based on the events that maybe happened up to that point, right? To the point where you started to realize something's different. I need to change.
And actually, that was something that I hadn't thought about, was the comparison to what you used to be, or what we all used to be, because obviously our bodies change over the years and with hormones and different stages of life. In terms then of an approach to, I mean, as you said, we all remember something somebody said to us, whether it was when we were a kid or a teenager in particular, and that definitely does stay with us. How in your work with people, how do you approach sort of finding out what that is? Can you help your clients, discover that trigger, and how can you help them to maybe manage it?
Yeah, we usually do it by discovering the stories that they tell themselves. So I have a good example. I remember I had a pair of shorts. This is
Yeah.
so specific, but I had a pair of shorts when I was younger that I wore all the time. And I loved them. I was a young girl and I loved them and I wore them all the time. And I have a very vivid memory of my grandma telling my mom, or like me, I can't remember exactly who, that was like, she wears those shorts all the time and they don't look good on her legs. And so I had this story growing up that my legs didn't look good, right? They didn't look good. They didn't look good in shorts. And so then it connects with, I need to lose weight. Well, this is usually where we find those stories, when someone has something like that, where, oh, my body's too big, or I'm not fit, or I'm not healthy, or I can't be safe around food because look, I lost control. So we start to identify those stories that these women have based on their approach, right? Based on, why are you doing this? Why are you wanting to change? Well, I want to change my body. I don't like my stomach, or something. And then we start to dive deeper into it. And the truth is, these stories that we have about ourselves and our bodies and our ability to change, they're truth for us. For example, if you are someone who feels like you don't have control around, mine used to be M&Ms, so we'll give that example. Like when I was around M&Ms, I would just eat them all the time. I had no control. And so I had a really strong story that I can't be around M&Ms because I'm not safe around them. I don't have any self-control. And so I had a lot of evidence built up on one side that I can't do M&Ms. I can't be around them. And that's a story. that we have to work on changing. And as we work on changing it and stepping into some new evidence that, okay, I can feel safe around this, I can feel safe around this, or even like if you're struggling in your body image, I'm worthy of showing up as I am, right? We start to change these stories, then that's where the actions and the behavior begin to change.
Yeah, I think especially if someone if someone is in a situation where they have, it's not going to be an overnight fix, whether they've, health issues that they're struggling with, whether it's, type 2 diabetes, something that's going to take some weeks or months maybe, to adjust their health. The mindset around that, in terms of I would never want someone to say, well, I'm going to feel good or I'm going to look good in 2 months' time. You'd be trying to find some way of letting them know, actually, you can look good now on your journey. It's about energy, isn't it? It's about your glow. It's about feeling good in yourself. There's no one perfect size. There's no one perfect shape. Actually, what people respond to is your energy, really, isn't it? So if
Yeah.
people that's one thing that I think if people can sort of feel good on the journey, they're probably more likely to stay the course.
100%. Yeah,
Yeah.
because I've worked with many women who have lost weight and still felt yucky in their bodies and say, well, I got to my goal, but I don't
Mm,
feel good. And so really, if you're not stepping into this relationship now with your body, there's really no expectation that that's going to change.
yeah.
And so I really love to teach people that you're building a relationship with your body, right? You are in your body and you are building that relationship. And if you want that relationship to thrive, just like any significant other, romantic relationship, whatever, it's the same thing. It needs communication, it needs time, it needs patience, it needs love, right?
Mm,
And then that relationship can be nourished and nurtured. When we ignore a relationship, we speak poorly to the other person, right? All of those things, it causes that relationship to crumble. And it's the same thing with our bodies. If we
mm.
can start to really change the narrative and the dialogue that we have with our bodies. And one thing I like to suggest is you can always affirmations are one of those tricky things because if someone says I am healthy and they don't feel that right now, I invite them to step into the phrase I am committed to. So you may not feel love in your body right now. You may feel disgust, you may feel messy, right? It may be a lot of emotions. And we don't have to feel love today. But what we're trying to do is work toward what it is we want to feel acceptance, right? Love, whatever word or phrase that is for you. It's about being committed to that outcome. And then, like you mentioned earlier, that's where the joy in the journey comes from.
So would you say that the first, say in terms of building those sustainable habits, a mindset first, maybe talking to the person first, giving them a roadmap, or how would you approach starting to change daily habits?
Yeah, we start with the mindset because as I kind of mentioned at the very beginning, the giving the plan wasn't the whole picture. It's part of the picture, but a lot of times the mindset is what we need to change to create the action. And, if you even just think about in life in general, your mindset leads to your actions. If you feel like you can't do something, you're probably not going to do it, right? If you feel like you can do something. And so any anything you think about is really the what you're going to do. And so we start by truthfully building that relationship with our body. And I can provide you I have a free I think it's 14-day audio course that's building that relationship with our bodies one day at a time, just little snippets of like this is one way that we start to nurture, we start to build that. And when we believe that our body is worthy of being nurtured and nourished, then we start taking those actions and we can start implementing some more of that strategy because it's not coming from a place of shame or disgust. It's coming from a place of love. I want to nourish this body. I want to nurture it to change. And when we punish it to change, that usually leads us back to the diet cycle.
Yeah, I think we've all been there. I certainly have, where my body wasn't doing what I wanted it to do. So you feel nearly disconnected from it. And I suppose that sort of led me to go back and study nutrition and everything. And I mean, we should all learn about how amazing our bodies are from a very young age, really, shouldn't we, in school? Like they do so much for us, and our bodies like struggle to stay well despite poor lifestyle and everything. So that appreciation of what it's doing for us, and then as you said earlier, that connecting with it. It is a great start. So do you do that in the form of like meditation or just affirmations, or what would your approach be there?
Yeah, so what we usually do is we identify those stories that we have. And so I usually have women, identify what stories are holding you back from making those changes. And then we start to work through a little dialogue with that. Okay, where is this story coming from? What does it mean about you? Is it true for everyone, or is it just true for you? And then we guide them into the question of, well, what story do you want to be true for you? I want to be healthy. I want to be a woman of wellness. I want to feel safe around food. And so we create that new story. And we, through a series of, just changing your mindset, some affirmations where it's like, I am committed to the positive outcome of this story, right? I'm committed to making this story. Once we've created that new story, that new belief, we attach an action to it. So the story could be, my body is worthy of showing up today as it is. And if that's the case, then the action that I might do is I might get in the swimsuit today and go swimming because it's worthy of showing up right now. And so we attach an action with the belief and the story that we want to be true, so that we start to build some evidence that, okay, I can do this.
And then when your clients start to make changes, we can often get knocked off track as well. How do you recommend that people stay consistent and mindful with their new healthy habits?
Yeah, I have a spiral up analogy. So I like to think of a
Okay.
spring, it's like a spiral. And in situations, you always have a pivotal moment or a choice to be made, right? If you have overeaten all the cookies and your choice is, well, gosh, I've screwed up, I might as well keep going. That's a spiral down. And it's really easy to spiral down. We're used to that, right? But in that critical moment, I always say push pause for a minute and identify and ask yourself, is there one thing I can do to spiral up one rung? And thinking about that, just having that tool in our head is so valuable, because we can say, okay, I can keep spiraling out of control and eat the cookies and feel the guilt and shame. Or I can pause and say, what is one way I can spiral up? You know what? I didn't eat dinner. I didn't eat lunch. I need to fuel my body with actual fuel.
Yeah.
Or, you know what? I'm having an emotion right now and I'm sensing it and it's stress. I'm going to spiral up and go on a 10-minute walk. Just one thing. And the cool thing is, one spiral usually leads to two spirals. And so when someone messes up, I always remind them that that is normal. It's normal to not be perfect. It's normal. And I actually think it's a good thing,
Mm.
because it gives us an opportunity to connect with our body again and say, something's not right, something's off. Our body is giving us that cue. Isn't that so cool that it's giving us that cue that something's not right? And I need you to pay attention to this. And as soon as we pay attention to it and we go back to the story that we've created, that, hey, my body is worthy of nurturing right now as it is, that spiral up is really easy, because we can ask ourselves, what is one thing I can do to nurture it right now?
I usually say, don't worry about the when, if people say, oh, I broke out yesterday or whatever, I had that bar of chocolate or whatever. Not that I have anything against chocolate. I love my dark chocolate myself. But I always say, don't worry about the last decision. The only thing that matters is the next decision that you that you made, I suppose, in an effort to try and free them from the guilt. Stop thinking about, yeah, maybe, you didn't have a great day yesterday. But do you find actually that sometimes, particularly women, can be eating too little? That they're not taking in enough calories because they're so busy and because they're so confused about all of the noise that we talked about earlier out there. So they don't know what to eat. And it can be a struggle to encourage them to actually eat more, particularly, if they are trying to lose weight, particularly midlife around the tummy. Do you find that as well?
Yes, and
Yeah.
I want to validate anyone's feelings because that is a little bit scary. It's scary to
Yeah.
be in a place where we feel like we have to be in a pretty heavy calorie restriction in order to
Yeah.
maintain our weight. And it's not your fault or anything. It's just that your metabolism is not working the way it needs to be. So we've
Mm.
taught our bodies that we're going to eat a lot less. And so our metabolism says, well, I don't need to burn that much, right? I don't
Yeah.
need to burn that many calories. It's going, like I said, it's going to give us those cues, and we're giving the cue of not eating very much. And so it's going to give us the cue of, well, I'm not going to burn. I'm going to hold on to this. And that can be
Yeah.
really scary. And so, um, I guess first of all, to just validate those feelings, that's
Mm.
normal and expected, especially when you're not sure what to do and it's scary to gain the weight. But what I really like to do from a practical standpoint is, if we're looking to increase the metabolism, I call it high energy flux, where we want to have a good machine. We want our metabolism to be a machine where it burns calories and it gives us energy. That's really what it is. And so we need to move our bodies more, which causes more caloric burn, and eat more
Mm.
because that is what tells our body, "Hey, you're giving me food. I can do something with it."
Yeah.
But there's always a little in between there of that's a little scary for me to increase my food. But what happens is your body starts to catch up and you are able to get to a place of maintenance and eventually weight loss. It's kind of like a reverse diet, right? We're increasing those calories, but at the same time we're also increasing movement so that we support your body in the whole picture.
Absolutely, because our body will conserve calories if we're not eating enough. So everything is just working at a lower pace, isn't it? Or all of our organs and everything are working at a lower pace. So you have to sort of build that back up so that it trusts that it's going to be getting the fuel it needs to keep working optimally. And even things like, say, teaching people about the circadian rhythm, and how, that can influence appetite and can influence metabolism as well. So of course that's another thing that modern lifestyles interrupt. People binge watching late into the night and blue lights from our phones, all of those kind of things.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And, it goes back to, I think everything's kind of going back to that base of the story.
Mm.
And if we can step into the belief and the story that my body can be trusted, I can trust my body, that's going to work, it's going to start telling me things, and I'm going to have trial and error to get there. Women's bodies, especially, they fluctuate. That's normal. And we're so scared of fluctuation. We're scared of a number changing even slightly because of what it means about us. And the truth is it means nothing about us, right?
Mm.
Our stories are what help us change that. And so when we go back to the root and say, I can trust my body to tell me what it needs, and I can trust myself. I'm committed to that. Maybe you don't feel that right now, but you're committed to, okay, I'm going to sit down and listen to my cues while I'm eating a meal. That's the first step, is learning to connect with what your body is telling you when you're eating. When you start to create those cues, when you start to get those cues down, then that trust builds. And that's really the disconnect that we usually start with.
Yeah. So, what do you think is an average time that it takes for people? You read different studies say it takes 3 weeks to change a habit, or it takes, 10 days. Would you see like an average time that's practical for people to expect to embed new habits?
Oh, that's a really good question. Um,
I mean,
you
maybe it's
know, I
different for everybody.
yeah, I
Yeah.
would say that it's it kind of goes back to the all or nothing thinking. Like once you
Mm,
have a habit, it's if you can get the magic number, it sticks. And the truth is, just like our bodies, our habits will fluctuate a bit, right? We're going to be in seasons of different things. I was on a call with a woman in my group yesterday who is going through menopause right now. And the habits that she has been doing, her body's changing and it's not matching the same thing. And so she's having to start shifting some of those habits. And so really, I'm going to be bold here and say on day one is when those habits start to change.
mm,
And and there's a lot of fear when we say we got to do this for life, right? There's a lot of like, oh, well, I have to do this forever. This is too much. But instead, the way that we change habits is, like you mentioned, kind of that one at a time approach. I don't have to worry about tomorrow. I just have to worry about today. And I can hold the goal of tomorrow, right? I can hold the goal of maybe in a year, I want my weight to be this way, or I want my health to be here. But the only thing that's going to control that outcome is the choice that you make right now in this moment. So I'm going to be a little bold, I guess, and just say the habits stick from day one because you commit to moving forward with them each and every day.
Oh, that's great, Elizabeth. That's a lovely way to end our conversation. And there's a few fabulous messages in there from you, like trusting your body and all of that. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you today. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
My thanks again to Elizabeth for her time and expertise. So, the store cupboard staple for this episode is a little garden herb called sage, which, like the rosemary that we mentioned a few episodes ago, is actually quite easy to grow yourself in a pot, on your patio, or your balcony. And it's one of the herbs that would be popular in our mixed herbs that we might use on our chicken or when we're making stuffing. So I find it a really comforting smell. I love the smell of sage. This herb is native to many areas around the Mediterranean Sea and is known to have been consumed in meals for thousands of years, in addition to having been used for medicinal purposes. Now, the Greeks and the Romans made great use of sage as a therapeutic herb and also used it as a meat preservative. They considered it to be a sacred plant, with the Romans even having a special ritual for collecting it. In the 10th century, Arab doctors actually believed that it increased insight and perception, or mental acumen. Towards the end of the Middle Ages, Europeans used it as a safeguard from witchcraft, and to this day, people use sage in smudging rituals. So, smudging or burning sage is a cleansing ritual used to help people, places, or even objects rid themselves of negative energy or even bad spirits. In the 17th century, sage tea was in high demand in China, to the extent that they would trade 3 cases of black tea leaves with Dutch traders for 1 case of sage leaves. Such was the value. Today, science is backing up the high regard that generations before us held for sage in terms of its medicinal and preservative benefits, thanks to its powerful antioxidants, primarily polyphenols like rosmarinic acid and carnosic acid, along with other compounds like caffeic acid, chlorogenic acid, ellagic acid, and rutin. These antioxidants help protect our cells from free radicals and potentially reducing the risk of chronic diseases and promoting overall health. Some of the effects reported that sage can have are that it's anhydrotic, so it stops perspiration, and that's why it's often used in menopause to ease hot flashes. It can help to lower blood sugar. It's antimicrobial, and that means that it can kill microorganisms such as bacteria or mold, or stop them from growing, because then they can cause disease. Sage can also dry up the flow of milk during lactation, so obviously pregnant and nursing women should avoid sage in concentrated forms like teas. So, when you have sage, what are you going to do with it? Well, chances are you already use it when you're making stuffing for chicken or turkey. But you can use it when you're roasting any meat, really, or, say, for example, on pork chops, and even on roasting vegetables. Herbs are amazing and small amounts go a long way. So you don't need to use loads and loads. Just sprinkle it over, say, if you have some dried herbs, or put a sprig of herbs if you're growing them yourself. You don't want the taste to be overpowering, and also, respect their therapeutic power. Now, you can, of course, make tea with it, but again, don't overdo it. So the recommendation is between 3 to 6 max cups per day. You could also sprinkle a little sage with some basil on a homemade pizza base or in a tomato-based sauce for pasta as well. Now, obviously, if you're taking a supplement or drops, always stick to the dosage recommended and buy them from a good health food shop. So make sure you're getting a good quality supplement. Thank you for listening again today, and hopefully there's enough information there to encourage you to add some more whole foods into your shopping trolley this week.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. I just wanted to clarify that the podcast is for informational purposes only and does not substitute professional care from a doctor or trained health professional, nor constitute medical advice or services if you're in a position to need either. However, if you found it interesting, you can subscribe to make sure you don't miss future episodes, or sign up for my newsletter on lynsharkeynutrition.ie.